Hey, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, everyone. We are so excited that you have joined us. Before we begin, I am here just to provide some general information. First and foremost, please ensure that your microphone is turned off throughout the duration of the presentation to allow everyone to give their undivided attention to our presenters. Please also ensure that you place all comments and questions for the Q&A session in the chat box. These will be monitored and passed along to our presenters accordingly. Additionally, due to the format of today's event, I recommend selecting active speaker view to ensure an optimal viewing experience. Bios for today's speakers are available on the COBB Institute website, www.thecobbinstitute.org. Finally, please take a moment to complete a very brief pre-webinar survey. The link for this will be placed in the chat box momentarily. It will take less than 2 minutes and would be of great help to us all. That is everything that I have, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Randall Morgan.
Thank you, Lily. Greetings to all of you who have chosen to join us this afternoon. We welcome you to an informative and timely webinar that will focus upon the daunting vaccine challenges that COVID-19 has presented to the world. We are especially focused upon the impact of the virus on the lives of those who live and work in our community. With the current shortage of vaccines for most of our community, as well as the concern by many of our neighbors about the safety of the vaccine, we have designed this webinar to focus upon questions that everyone has about our future with the current pandemic. We will have a panel of experts from our community that will be able to answer the questions that concern African Americans, Latinx, and also all members of the community throughout the United States. This webinar has as its presenting sponsors the W. Montague COBB-NMAHI Health Institute and the All of Us Research Program. We have several co-sponsors that include the Gulfcoast Medical Society, the Multicultural Health Institute, and Unidos Now of Sarasota, Bradenton. Supporting local organizations include Gamma Xi Boulay, Asala, and Links Incorporated. The COBB Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit research institute affiliated with the National Medical Association. The mission of the COBB Institute is to identify unmet healthcare needs and develop solutions that will reduce racial and ethnic health disparities and improve health of all U.S. residents. The COBB Institute has taken a leadership role during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic in devising a strategy for promotion of vaccine education, clinical trials participation, vaccine allocation, and vaccine acceptance, primarily in the Black and Brown communities. I am honored to serve as the Chief Executive Officer of the COBB Institute. The title of the webinar today is Vaccine Update 2021 for our community, a focus upon Sarasota and Manatee counties. To begin our program today, I would like to introduce to you our moderator, Dr. Winston Price. Dr. Price is a board-certified pediatrician, a past president of the National Medical Association, and the Director of Information Technology for the COBB Institute. Dr. Price, please continue with our program for today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morgan, and good afternoon to all of our attendees. We are so excited that we have assembled some of the leading experts in the field of women's health, psychiatry, socially relevant population health, community activism, and infectious diseases. We will address the many critically important questions that communities of color want answers to as we traverse this pandemic scourge on our societies. If ever there was a need for our hopeful dreams to define our future for a better tomorrow, that day would be today. You, each and every one of you, hold the key to assisting yourself, your family, and your community through this darkness and into the light. We encourage you to listen, learn, and challenge the panelists in helping you to understand our path forward against COVID-19. Our format for the next several minutes will be a round robin of questions to our panelists. followed by an additional Q&A of direct questions from the attendees that come to us via the chat box. So feel free to enter those questions and comments at any time during the session. We will also provide invaluable resources to the attendees via the chat box and also via email during and after the webinar. Lastly, the Montague Cobb Health Institute website will continue to provide up-to-the minute information regarding COVID-19 resource material, which can be found at www.thecobbinstitute.org. Today, our stellar panelists include Dr. Washington Hill, who is the founding director of maternal fetal medicine at Sarasota Memorial Hospital and a world-renowned expert on women's health. Dr. Lisa Merritt is the founder of the Multicultural Health Institute in Sacramento, California, and focuses her attention on health disparities and the economic impact of prevention strategies. Dr. Manuel Gordillo is the leading expert on pandemic infectious diseases, and he is the epidemiologist at the Sarasota Memorial Hospital. We are enlightened to have Dr. Janet Taylor. She's a community psychiatrist and also an often sought after speaker on talk shows and major media outlets on topics of racism and racial trauma. And also thrilled to have the local leader, Liz Cordero. She is a community activist and executive director for Unidos Now, and she has been recognized for her leadership and empowerment of the Latinx population in Sarasota. So sit back, relax, and with that, let the show begin. So we're going to start with a question to Dr. Washington Hill. Person asks, I've heard that if I get the vaccine and it will make my ability to get pregnant difficult, and it will take extra time for me to get pregnant in the future. Is that true?
Well, thank you very much, Winston. And I want to say it's a pleasure to be here with this distinguished group of colleagues. I think what's important, I hear two things in that question. The first one is I heard. And I think it's very important, and one of the things that we're trying to do this afternoon is to separate what I heard is from true science and the facts. So I would encourage the listeners to listen closely, and certainly if they heard something, share it with us so that we can correct it or confirm it. There's no evidence from what we know at this time that receiving the vaccine prevents you from getting pregnant or your partner from getting pregnant, or prevents you from getting pregnant when you wish. There's a proviso there, and that is that very few of the patients in the clinical trials were pregnant. In fact, I think the intent was that none were pregnant, but some did end up to be pregnant. Their pregnancies progress normally, and there's no reason to think that they won't be able to get pregnant in the future. So the answer to that question is, as far as we know, and other studies will look at pregnant women more in the future, the answer is no.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Lisa Merritt, is there a different vaccine being used for different communities? How is it decided, and who gets to decide which kind and when?
Well, that certainly was a concern that was raised early on. What I'm happy to say is with the outreach work that the Multicultural Health Institute has been doing in the community, we've been able to help educate that there right now are available Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, which are the two that are available in our area. And it is the same one that's being given to all communities. The challenge is that as people are becoming more aware of the extent of the pandemic and their desire to protect themselves as they're gaining confidence with our educational outreach, is how to enroll and get on the list to get the vaccine. So I think that people are starting to understand that it is none of the kind of prior challenges that people had about communities of color, that what's more, how do they get a hold of it and how do they get in line with the computers to overcome the registration and things like that.
Great. Well, Dr. Gordillo, are there any contraindications for the vaccine?
Very few, fortunately. There's a couple of medical contraindications. One is if you're allergic to the first vaccine, you shouldn't take the second one. The allergic reactions that we're referring to are the immediate allergic reaction, what we call anaphylaxis. So they're serious and they're very rare. For example, with the Pfizer vaccine, occur 1 in 100,000, and with the Moderna vaccine, more like 1 in 250,000. So not very common so far. Just to put in perspective, penicillin allergy, for example, occurs 1 in 25,000. So this is a 10th as common as a penicillin allergy is of this severity. And the other one is also rare. It's when you've had COVID and they give you a treatment that you call convalescent plasma or the monoclonal antibodies. There's two specialized antivirals that sometimes we give in hospitals or sometimes in the outpatient treatment centers for COVID. If you got one of those, you have to wait 3 months. And then one group of people that really has not been approved is children. So if you're a child up to 16 years old, not ready yet. It's not a contraindication, but we don't advocate at this point vaccinating children.
Great. So I'm tired of COVID-19. I'm worrying about so many stresses in terms of food security and housing and being evicted, losing my job. How do I know if I'm depressed, Dr. Taylor?
So that's a great question, Dr. Price. How, throughout COVID-19, this racial reckoning, so many different day-to-day issues that so many viewers, listeners to this webinar will hear and certainly resonate with are happening anyway, despite everything. I mean, the day-to-day struggles of people continue, but we all can get sad. But if you have a sadness that lasts longer than 2 weeks, or you have trouble getting motivated, have lost your usual interest in doing things, overeat, undereat, have trouble sleeping, and even maybe feel like you want to hurt yourself, kill yourself, then you may have a major depression. And the key fact is that depression is treatable. And you should talk to your healthcare provider, talk, to a psychiatrist or therapist if you can't. If you don't have health insurance, don't let that be a barrier to stop you. You can check in with your local county mental health association. Where I work at Centerstone, we treat people who do not have insurance, but this has never been as important a time as now to treat your depression, because what we know is that people who are depressed will have a tendency to not follow up with their doctor's visits, not take care of themselves in terms of, mindful eating and working out. And this is really a critical time to be on your best mental health, in the sense of, we know, as the World Health Organization says, that there's no physical health without mental health. And this is really just a crucial time to take care of yourself. So find someone to talk to and be evaluated, and know that depression's treatable.
Thank you. Thank you. And we are fortunate to have Ms. Luz Conquero. The issue of having certain populations be at risk because of language barriers can be a real one, especially in the Latinx community. And while she is not a health professional, I'm sure she has to field a wealth of questions coming to her population. And so we'll throw some questions at her, but we're going to ask the clinicians to buy in on the answers. And so one of the questions relates to an individual that has a person with cancer in the family and wants to know, do they need to get vaccinated? They're afraid of the vaccine and that it might harm them.
I think there are so many issues in the Latino community. One is the fear and the trust in the system. Also, the language barrier, transportation barriers. And people are very concerned because there are so many families that live in the same place. You know, there is density in the living arrangements of the Latino community. So if there is a relative who is sick with cancer, what's going to happen to this relative if any of the others who are living in the same household contract the virus? The second thing is that, as Dr. Taylor pointed out, usually it's difficult to access mental health services. There is a stigma attached that, you know, we don't talk about our personal issues outside. No se lavan los trapitos en el aire. It's an expression that it's used. You know, you wash your clothes inside, not outside. And we have been very proactive in providing all the resources because we've seen people with mild cases of depression and people who are feeling the isolation and the anxiety. But I would love one of the clinicians or the doctors to talk about the issue of having someone with cancer in the family, and is it necessary for all the members of the family to get the vaccine? And the patient that has cancer should get the vaccine.
Great, thank you. So, Dr. Hill, some individuals have heard that the products of abortions were used to develop this vaccine. I had a lengthy discussion with a nurse on the OB floor who refuses to get the vaccine because she's concerned about the products of fetal tissue that are used. Is that true or not?
I think it's a very good question. And I think it's a very frequently asked question by communities of faith. And I know my church is on this call. I'm only divided up into two parts, and any of the other, my colleagues here can answer as well. The first question is always, are there products of conception, fetal cells, whatever, in the material that I'm going to be given as a vaccine? And the answer to that is no. As Dr. Gordello and Dr. Merritt and others can explain, this is an mRNA virus, and that means it's genetic material, genetics. It has nothing to do with live or dead or fetal tissue. So the answer to the question of whether or not there is fetal tissue in the vaccine is there or not. Now, the next question is, in the development of the vaccine by Moderna and by Pfizer, were fetal cells used to determine whether or not the vaccine worked? That's a pretty plain question. And the answer to that question is yes. And these were fetal cells, not fetal tissue, fetal cells from the 1960s or 70s that were used to see whether or not the vaccine worked. One of the things that had to be done, and Dr. Gordello can explain this further, is that we needed to know whether the vaccine worked. You don't want to get a vaccine that doesn't work. And one of the ways to do that, or the way that the two companies did it, was to test the vaccine against generations old fetal cells. So I hope that, now another point that I have to answer is when you look at this, you look at what men of faith have said, and the Pope even said that since there is no alternative, and since this disease is so devastating, that to receive this vaccine is quite appropriate. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
It does. And I want to echo your initial statement that no, there are no products of conception in the vaccine that are being given to the populace.
Right. No products of conception, no fetal parts, no fetal cells. I think we've answered that pretty clearly.
Great, great, great. So Dr. Merritt, what are some of the side effects or long-term effects of the vaccine? I know people are always concerned about, yeah, but it may be safe now, but then years from now, I'm going to have problems?
Well, that is a valid concern, but what's so beautiful about this technology, which is what this vaccine is, and I just want to take one moment and say that I was inspired on I don't know if you listen to the this Brilliant Mind show on NPR, but they talked about how research is evolving because of the diversity within clinicians, and that research teams that are more diverse actually come up with more creative solutions and also are more widely read. And that we have to remember this vaccine was a worldwide global effort to come up with, all different kinds of people sharing information and racing to try to help save humanity, basically. So they really looked at this, and the beauty is so far we've had a few million doses out already. And in fact, we've had fewer adverse reactions from this vaccine than from flu vaccine. And I think Dr. Gordillo can also attest to that. And usually if you're going to have some type of reaction, it's going to happen within the short term, which is part of why you can't just get the shot and run off. They watch you to make sure nothing happens, because if it's going to, it's generally going to happen fairly quickly. Now, with any kind of vaccination, the whole idea is to stimulate the immune system. And to stimulate the immune system, that means that you're going to activate an immune response. And your immune response consists of cells that will generate chemical mediators and create actions in your body as it begins to be stimulated by that messenger RNA to create antibodies, so that if it ever does see the coronavirus, it's at a state of readiness. So that means you're going to, first of all, have soreness at the site of the vaccination. You're going to put a needle in your arm. Yes, it's small. Luckily, I had a pediatric nurse. She was perfect. I didn't even know she had done it. I was like, well, that's it? It was far less painful than the flu vaccine, I'll tell you right now. And you will have soreness possibly at the injection site, depending on how your body reacts to that. You may have over the next day or two headache, muscle aches. Some people even have a fever because their body's immune system is responding to this thing. It's being stimulated. You take a little Tylenol, whatever, put a little ice on that. It's fine. I just kept working. I mean, I just kept going. And so I didn't even really notice too much. Some people do get fatigue, and they have a registry that you can sign up for through the CDC. They very much want to track who's getting the vaccine and if there are further adverse reactions and what happens over time. But thus far, we are not really seeing any significant deviation. In fact, we're wonderfully relieved, and it's turning out to be extremely minimal in terms of the adverse long-term effects that people are experiencing.
Great, thank you. So for the non-clinical folks on the webinar, these chemical mediators are like infection-fighting hormones and chemicals in the bloodstream that fight off the infection, that they're part of the body's way of fighting any infection, whether it be a cut or a scratch or a pimple.
Exactly. And then the next time, if it comes up against it, they're at a state of readiness to recognize it and immediately contain it and suppress any infection.
Great, great, great.
The 95% rate of effectiveness, which is just phenomenal.
Very good, very good. Dr. Gordillo, is the technology used for this, at least for two of the vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, is this a brand new technology?
It is not. As a matter of fact, I worked on mRNA vaccine back in 1989. That was when it started, around that time. At that time, there were a lot of technical challenges. That's one of the reasons that I didn't pursue research. It was technically challenged to do that. We didn't know how to get it into cells and a number of other problems. But over the next 30 years, scientists overcame all these challenges. How do you get it into cells? They put it in this oily bubble. They learn how to put it into cells. When it comes to viruses, you put any mRNA, your immune system will immediately recognize it as not part of my body and will attack it and get rid of it and destroy it. So the scientists have to learn how to make it stealthy, to evade that attack. So they learn how to do that. They replace a part of the molecule with something else that makes it stealthy. And then when it comes to coronavirus also protects itself from the attack of the immune system. So it moves kind of like a door that it has at the top of it, protecting the head, kind of like a helmet. So they learn how to keep the helmet off, so to speak. So those three very important discoveries allowed this vaccine to be ready. And as a matter of fact, an African American scientist at the NIH last January was the head of the research division in vaccines, Dr. Corbett, and she came up with the first mRNA construct. And this is the vaccine that we have today. When she came up with the construct, gave it to Moderna, and the rest of the story we can tell later. But this is not a new technology. It's been around for 30 years. It's been improving. So when this pandemic came along, scientists were ready to deliver this fabulous vaccine.
Great, thank you. And for certain populations, particularly in the Black population, we have an immune system called a racism immune system. We remember. And so when things come up to us that seem like a past attack, we resist it. And so for the Black community, it's difficult to get them to buy in on a vaccine when some populations in that category of race feel that this is another Tuskegee. And so overcoming those barriers are important. For instance, if your mother says that she's not going to take the vaccine because it's not safe for Black people, Dr. Taylor, do you have suggestions on how you address this?
Yes, I mean, everything you're alluding to is absolutely true and unfortunate. And we know that there's a long history of racism and bias in medicine, but now is a time that to combat certainly the centuries of mistrust, we can do that with factual information and figure out how things do work, and also look at the risk and reward. And unfortunately, we know that 70% of individuals who are essential workers happen to be disproportionately Black and brown, and they will need access to the vaccine. We know that even though Black and brown people make up 13% of the population in America, depending on where you are, 30 to 50% of them were likely to be the ones more likely to die. So it's really, really crucial that at this time, knowing the information that we have, that we encourage Black and brown people to get the vaccine, to talk about their experiences, and really, in some cases, unfortunately, I mean, it may depend upon your work, whether you're able to work or not, whether you have the vaccine, certainly whether you're able to travel, whether you're able to go to school. So, we need to teach one. If you've had the vaccine, talk to people about it. I've had the vaccine. The second day I had chills and then I was fine. Teach people what to expect. I'm so glad that we are doing this webinar in English and Spanish, making sure that people understand, but we really need to get most of the population vaccinated, and certainly, people in Black and brown communities. But the other thing, Tuskegee is one thing, but at our own institutions, our own community centers, mental health centers, hospitals, we have to look at the mistrust that's there anyway and see what we can do to break down those barriers to make people feel comfortable when they enter our doorway. So Tuskegee is historical, but right now we have a lot of local places where people don't feel that they have trust there, and we need to work on that individually.
Great.
Absolutely.
And there's a whole host of expertise in the medical community, in the health policy space, in the researchers that wasn't present during Tuskegee. And it's important for each of us to be an ambassador in our communities to get the message out, to kind of set the record straight. And certainly the COBB Institute is working diligently along with the committee to combat COVID-19. And it's the only way that we're going to be able to see an end to this particular pandemic. Ms. Corchera, the vaccine, will it last forever, or do I need to get vaccinated every year? Is this going to be like the flu shot?
So I would like one of the doctors to respond to that, but I was listening to Dr. Fauci the other day, and he said that when the majority of the population gets vaccinated, we will get a state where we achieve herd immunity, and then this vaccine may be something that will do as the pneumonia or the flu. So maybe one of the doctors, Dr. Gordillo, Is that accurate?
Yes. Well, I'll never contradict Dr. Fauci. I learned that a long time ago. But yeah, absolutely. The vaccine, we don't know how long is it going to last. Most vaccines require a boost at some point, and especially these seasonal viruses require a boost sometime down the road. Like influenza, for example, we do it every year. Is this going to be like an influenza? Maybe if we compare to other coronaviruses, because this is not the only coronavirus that circulates, there are others that produce the common colds. The immunity against those common cold coronaviruses lasts 2 years. So some of that, us think that maybe it will last for 2 years, but it's something that we don't have a good visibility net right now. I think over the next few months, we'll learn more and we'll be able to answer that question better.
In regards to what Dr. Taylor was alluding, I heard from some of the families in the Latino community that in their churches, they've been told that the coronavirus is not that real, is not that bad, but also that the vaccines have a component that would take over their DNA, and also it's a way of them to be controlled. So we've been telling them that those are conspiracy theories, that it is important when the vaccine becomes available to everyone to get vaccinated. I think it's irresponsible that in some places where people have position of power are spreading those conspiracy theories. So I agree that it's a big task for the entire community to talk about the vaccine. Those that have been vaccinated need to talk about it, but also we need to encourage everyone to get vaccinated as soon as possible, as soon as it becomes available.
Great. And as the availability increases, hopefully people will go as part of a community activity en masse, the same way people ask their neighbors and friends to go and vote collectively. And I hope that, in the new rescue package that was outlined by the new administration, to have mobile carts going into communities that are hard to reach, and also having vaccine centers for drive-through, maybe that will also help. And making sure there are enough Spanish-speaking centers to administer the vaccine will also make a big difference.
And I just want to make another comment that it's very important what Luz is saying, because so many in that community are essential workers. However, they have little access to care. And there's not enough material information in bilingual Spanish and English, and much of their information is transmitted verbally. And so that's why at all of our events in the community, we love partnering with Unidos Now and Healthy Teens and other organizations, so we can make sure and reinforce. Even yesterday, we just had a big event and we were able to reinforce and allay some of these concerns. But I also want to take the moment, I put a message in the box, but say again, we must all keep wearing our masks. The vaccine is not a panacea and it's not immediate. We're going to be wearing masks well into the summer, everybody. So just, get your designer mask on, whatever you need to do, but keep wearing it, please, and washing the hands.
Great, great. Yeah, that was a question I had for Dr. Hill. And so Dr. Hill, the individuals who haven't seen their grandchildren and close family in a while, once they receive the vaccine, how soon can they go to see those family members?
Well, that's a perfect question, Winston. My grandchildren, 4 lovely grandchildren, are about 15 minutes from me. And I have not seen them in a while. Actually, they occasionally come and leave me some food in the driveway. To answer your question and to make it crystal clear, and I've received my second dose, we are going to be wearing our mask and doing all of the other public health things that everyone can have memorized, probably until the fall, if we're lucky. And some authorities have said optimistically in the fall, we should be able to start getting back to some sense of normality. a woman was on the news and she was thrilled that she had gotten her first shot at SMH or somewhere. And she said, oh, I'm so glad I've gotten my shot. I can now go see my grandchildren. No, you actually can't. And you need to continue wearing your mask and doing those things. And the question comes up, well, why? I thought I got the vaccine, I'm good to go. There are two reasons. One was alluded to earlier in this conversation. None of the vaccines are 100%. Right, Dr. Cordillo?
Absolutely.
None of them. And they were thrilled when this one came back 95, 94%. Well, that means that 5% of the time, the vaccine that you received did not work. The second reason is, and this may be answered in the next several months, and that is we're not sure once I received the vaccine, once you receive the vaccine, 2 doses, that you cannot spread the virus. And that's a question that we don't know yet. So the bottom line, hear us all, is that once you receive the vaccine, first or second dose, you have to continue to wear your mask and do all the other things that we have talked about. Social distancing, not meeting in crowds. You know what they are. We need to continue to do them. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we get a lot of people taking the vaccine, and we've heard about all of these mutant strains that have been occurring in South Africa and in England. Won't giving the vaccine cause more of these mutations to develop and more resistant strains to the virus? What do you think about that, Dr. Merritt?
Well, the beauty of this is that with this technology, first of all, we can pivot, just write a new program for a different mRNA. Sounds simple, it's a little more complex than that. What I was pleased was, I can't remember his name, I'm sure Dr. Gordillo knows, but the professor at Brown, who's one of the leading epidemiologists that they've been having as advisor. Yeah, he was speaking to that. They have looked at, on the World Health Organization, so thus far, it appears that our vaccines will hold even against these more infectious strains. The things, they're more transmissible. So all the more reason that we have to be vigilant with wearing masks and washing hands. It is still a puny virus. It will succumb to salt and water, okay? But we just have to do it. The thing is, people are lax, and this thing, and also there's now the need for eye protection, particularly if you're working close in with patients and things like that, which clinicians, we've been already doing that because it can actually get in that way. So it's not as much whether or not the vaccine will help protect as much how we have to be more vigilant to not get infected either way. But so far, it looks like the vaccine is going to give us a sufficient amount of immunity for those who are trying to protect against even those more virulent strains. Our bigger challenge is that people, we're so behind in Florida that people are just not as adherent to the universal practices of wearing masks, distancing, washing hands, and taking the precautions fully to heart, like the discipline of other places. So we have to stay with that, and that's going to be our best answer, I think. Dr. Gordillo can add on to that.
Yes, I can say that this variant, the scientists, we have some weird names, bad names. I would say B117. Who's going to remember that? They need to give a nice, cute name. But anyways, it is estimated that this is probably going to replace the currently circulating virus, maybe by March or April. So it'll be more contagious, or we're going to have a more contagious virus. So like Lisa said, a much bigger reason for all of us when we have the opportunity to get the vaccine to get it. We want to protect ourselves, our communities, our families, and the faster that we do it, the better. Lisa was just typing a message that she said that in Florida, given 1 million vaccines, but only 50,000 of them have African American, and I can guarantee about the same number is going to maybe proportionally, maybe 100,000 are going to be Latinos. So this is too low. This is affecting our communities more than the white community. So it's a double injury that we're not taking the vaccine when the vaccine is offered to us. You know, I saw this happening in our hospital. Our hospital is the biggest in the county. The vaccine was offered, and it's just, it breaks your heart when you see our groups are not taking the vaccine. I would go to talk to where they are working and asking them, are you taking the vaccine? And they're telling me, no, I'm not going to take it because of this reason that I read on the internet, or some disinformation, misinformation, or because of some historical reasons. But, you know, so I had to go and dispel those, some of the myths, talk about acknowledging some of the historical problems that have been with vaccines. But we have to avoid that double injury that we are being put through with this situation. So when the vaccine is available to you, please go ahead and take it for the reasons that have been already articulated.
Yeah, and it's a natural thing for viruses to mutate. I mean, it's a good media. I mean, the media is running out of stuff to say about COVID already. We've been COVIDed, like, you know, plummeted with, you know, pummeled with COVID. So yeah, I mean, viruses mutate. All the more reason, let's get as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible, and don't give it another place to land, infect somebody, and be able to infect other people, because everyone that gets infected with an active infection has a chance to infect 2 or 3 other people. That's why the numbers have escalated the way they have. And even more so in our community, because people live in closer quarters, they're doing the essential work. So the more that we focus on the BIPOC, Blacks, Indigenous, people of color communities, that we protect that line of defense, that's going to even that much more quickly help us to achieve that the essential herd immunity, and also protect ourselves and lower this disproportionate death rate and infection rate and hospitalization rate that's happening.
So isn't it because of, you know, there's a certain mentality amongst people in general not to be early adopters to anything that's new, and the whole mindset of a Operation Warp Speed and rushing this through, hasn't this been one of the issues that has caused the pushback in the Black and Brown community? I think the earliest vaccine that went through trials in record speed was 4 years prior to this in the mumps vaccine. So how do we dispel the myths about this being a rushed vaccine that's unsafe?
So I think that one of the things is that we cannot compare this vaccine, which has been adequately funded, had all the best scientists working on it, and it had volunteers. We had the disease was very prevalent in the community. So compare it to other vaccines that we've developed. You know, this is just a testament on how things work when there's adequate funding. We always, Dr. Mary, Dr. Hill, Dr. Taylor, we are always asking the government, we're asking for more funding, because this is what we need. Scientists need funding to do their research and to bring it to fruition. So this is an example of how things work well when science is well funded. If you compare to other vaccines, they're poorly funded, takes forever to get the funding. The researchers take years to get the money to carry on their research. And once they get the vaccine itself, there are no volunteers. There is no disease to where you can do your experiments. Mm-hmm. And then once you get the vaccine, then you need to get somebody to develop the vaccine. You need to have somebody in big pharma to do that. All of that was taken away. Yes, I hate the name Operation Warp Speed. I think it's a poor choice of name, but the concept was developed by a doctor at the FDA, Dr. Peter Marks. It's a brilliant idea of trying to get everything done at the same time. You know, you do the research. You know, the laboratory came up with the mRNA. They immediately took it to a company that produced a vaccine, and then they started putting it in volunteers. And these volunteers are heroes. You know, this is I'm talking about March, April, May. Those volunteers that would go get vaccinated, should be so grateful to all of them. And there are many in our own Latinos and African American communities that volunteer for those important studies. So those got done. And then we moved to the next step, the larger trials. There was not a single day where nothing was getting done. There was no wait. Everything was seamless. And at the same time, the funding was already given to the manufacturers to start producing the vaccine. So by the time November came, yes, we completed the trials. We found it's 95% effective. So that we didn't have to wait another 6 months for the vaccine to be produced. It was already under production. So the government took away that factor. So by December, we had vaccine available. So this is the way things should work, if you think about it, for all research, that this is the way things work. We cannot compare this with the lousy way that we've been doing it before with underfunded research and all kinds of other problems.
Can I just add, I think, I just want to push back a little bit. I mean, Black and Brown community, we are some of the first in terms of from a technology standpoint, the latest iPhone and Apple phone and sneakers and all those things. So we are not averse to new technology, but I think the understanding how things work and understanding the why people need to do it, especially if we're living in conditions where maybe there's mom and grandmom, and understanding that like you may be healthy, but you need to get the vaccine so that you can keep other people healthy. And just that real making sure that in plain language, Black and Brown people just understand how critical it is right now. But we utilize new technology, but I think we just don't have enough compelling conversations and that one-on-one where we see people who look like us, who are explaining it to us why we need to do it. And I think that needs to be more of a focus as opposed to the mindset that we are averse to new technology, because we're not.
Right. Yeah, so probably Operation Global Cooperation would have been a better term. And the fact that we had, I believe in most of the major studies for Pfizer's product and Moderna, they actually got up to about a third of the participants in the studies were people of Black and Brown color. So that in itself is a testament that the vaccine has been tested in our populations, and therefore, as far as we can tell, is safe for the general population. So, I mean, it's stressful. Just, we talked a little bit about some of the misinformation that occurs on the internet and through social media and all of the different beauty parlor and hair salons and barbershops that get missed in terms of giving the wrong message. So how does one deal with all of this and be depressed and stressed and have anxiety? How can you self-manage all of those things mentally, Dr. Taylor?
Well, if you have a history of depression or bipolar or schizoaffective, make sure that you are seeing your own, your psychiatrist, therapist, nurse practitioner, taking your medication, number one. But two, understand that the way our brain works the best is when we have credible facts and information. And in lieu of those things, our brain, in a wrong attempt to help us, will make up a worst case scenario, which makes things even worse. So number one is to find the facts. Number two is to understand that stress is a part of life, but we need to give our brain and body a time to recover. So, work out regularly, eat the right food, practice positive thinking, and also really practice self-care, which is when you put yourself at the top of your to-do list and are taking care of yourself physically, psychologically. Establish what's under your control. Part of the issue causing a lot of stress now is that people who may not have wanted the vaccine do, and just trying to get on a list or find access is a huge part of stress. And the other, people are tired. This feels like one more thing, from COVID-19, and people are just saying, well, why try? We have to encourage people to try. So really it is about resetting and having a mindset of growth and resilience versus, the worst is going to happen, I can't ever do anything. Keep looking, keep trying, find information, ask questions, and really look at how to make yourself individually healthier, and knowing that can make your family healthier by passing on credible, relevant information when you find it.
Great, great. So I had a family come in the other day, and the mother, they're Latin, Latino, they had the virus, and they figured, okay, I had that, I don't need to go ahead and get the vaccine, even though they have a grandparent who's over 65 living in the household with the primary family. I'm sure you get a lot of those questions, Luz, in terms of whether they need to get the vaccine if they had the disease already.
Yeah, we do. Some people think that because they have the virus, they should not do anything else. But however, they have relatives in the house. And so we tell them that it is important for them to stay healthy, but also to get vaccinated and to make sure that they try to get their parents and grandparents vaccinated as well. We also hear things, you were talking about how important has been the development of the vaccine and all the clinical trials. Some people think that we are guinea pigs. And I said, no, that stage is over. Right now, the vaccine is working, and it's important that all of us try to get the vaccine as early as possible whenever it becomes available.
Great, great. Dr. Gordillo, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I hear that comment a lot too. A lot among Latinos is that we are in an experimental phase, and we're really past that. I think sometimes when they get the vaccine and it says EUA, which is an emergency use authorization, that is just the way the government the FDA has set this up. There is full approval, but a vaccine cannot get full approval until a minimum amount of time has elapsed, which is a year. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of the equivalent of a full authorization. This is as good as it's going to get. So I think it's important to know that these two Moderna vaccines, they're not experimental vaccines now. They're fully approved. There's a lot of safety data. Like Dr. Merritt said earlier, this is very, very safe vaccine. We've vaccinated already about 20 million people in the United States. And we're not seeing that many side effects with this. All what we're seeing is what we call the reactogenicity, as our own immune system reacting to the antigen that is produced by the mRNA, which is what is expected. It's our own immune system at work. We don't see bad side effects. And then what I'm seeing also is comments, especially out of social media, which is, it's a problem that happens whenever you give a medication to a lot of people, whenever you give a vaccine to a lot of people, and all large vaccination campaigns have this problem. If you give 10 million people a vaccine, let's say take away the vaccine. Let's take a period of time, 2 months. What happens with 10 million people in 2 months? It's about 20,000 of them will die. Mm-hmm. Okay, about 10,000 of them will have a stroke, and about 10,000 of them will have a heart attack. Now, this is the same population, you give them a vaccine. So naturally, what happens is people have a tendency to associate that death, that heart attack, that stroke with the vaccine that was given. But it wouldn't happen anyways, vaccine or no vaccine. Remember, we're vaccinating people that are elderly, that have comorbidities, that they have illnesses that are predisposed to that. So you have to be very careful with how you can do a false association of events. So those are two important issues. This is not experimental, and be careful with misattributing side effects. That's why the FDA and the CDC are very careful at tracking the safety of these vaccines after people are getting vaccinated.
Right. I think it's also really, if I could just make one more point, I see a comment in the chat. The mRNA, once it gets processed and read by the cells in our body, doosh, it dematerializes. Mm-hmm. So it just starts a process which then your body creates an immune response. This happens every day, all day long, as our bodies are confronted with a variety of things that will trigger an immune response. So I think, this concern about what's going to happen years and years and years from now is unwarranted.
Mm-hmm.
I think
I would also say that what we probably know is that the virus, if you get COVID, there are people that we're
That's where I was
seeing
going.
already with side effects. Now, again, we don't know what happened if you get COVID, what's going to happen in a year or 10 years from now.
Right.
But we do know that even within the time frame that we already know, which is about 9 months, people are having problems 9 months later. I see people with lung problems, with fatigue, mental
Headaches,
fogginess, all
psychiatric.
kinds of different symptoms that, when we talk about now 40 million people with this disease, we're going to see a lot of sequela, a lot of problems from that. So that's something that it's not taken into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to weigh out the risk of long-term effects from the vaccine versus, first of all, surviving COVID and not being the 20% of people that end up getting hospitalized or worse, that's part of why we're doing this messaging today, because we have all seen the tragedies. We have all lived the tragedies, and we're trying to prevent that. This is the ultimate opportunity for preventive medicine. And even people with asymptomatic infections are now being found to have long-term effects, that they begin to have headaches, fatigue, other strange things happening in their bodies. So we'll have to all work together on this, but if we can try to prevent you from having a full-on infection, your body can bounce it right out before the virus can get into your nervous system. We've seen this with HIV, with herpes, with other viruses. We know if they get into the nervous system, they can wreak havoc for years.
And that's an important point that you raise with regard to us diffusing the myths that are going to be generated, because some of the individuals who get the vaccine, who we've been successful in convincing them, may have some long-term side effects from having undiagnosed COVID prior to getting the vaccine, and then attributing it to the vaccine and causing, the old wives' tales to precipitate through the community of why they shouldn't have gotten it.
Exactly.
So we have to continually dispel those myths.
There's a question in the chat or a comment in the chat in regards to, I really want to know what this vaccine is going to do to me 3 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important when we don't know to say we don't know.
Absolutely.
We don't know. You can pick 2 years, you can pick 3 years, you can pick 5 years. All of us, I think, on this call have received the vaccine. What is it going to do 3 years from now? I don't know. One thing that we do need to remind the viewers is that the clinical trials are still going on. So information is still being gathered from those trials, and we'll be able to get additional information. But in answer to the person who said that they would really like to know before they agree to get the vaccine, what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years, unfortunately, we don't know. We do know that if you get COVID and become sick, you have a 1% mortality. We do know from the data that we have is that if you get the vaccine, the chances of you having an adverse reaction and dying is probably 1 in 500,000 to 1 in a million. So those are things that we do know, which I hope will help you decide whether or not you want to get the vaccination.
Great. Great. So as we get into this next phase of trying to vaccinate the lower risk individuals, one of the issues is we have transient populations, and do they have to get both vaccinations at the same place, or can they travel from one place to the other to get the second vaccine? And what if they lose their vaccination card, Dr. Hill?
Oh, I was asked that. I'm sure all of us get phone calls. And I was asked, there's 3 questions there. I think the first one is, I received the vaccine today and I'm supposed to be back in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but I got to go to somebody's wedding. Can I go to the wedding and get the vaccine out there? And the answer right now is no, although there's some leeway that was discussed this week. So the bottom line is, if you get the vaccine here today, then you should be around in 3 to 4 weeks, depending on which one you get, to get the second vaccine. There was, I think in the last 3 days from CDC, that said, if you received one, let's say you received the Pfizer and you're someplace and can you get the Moderna? And the answer to that was yes, but that's not the plan. And then the other thing is, what happens if you lose your card? I still can't find my card. It's in the computer. It's in the computer, and my card's here somewhere.
Okay.
And one suggestion, when you get your card, take a photo, take a snapshot of it, and so you have it. And if you don't have a smartphone,
I don't have an iPhone, so I don't know how to do that.
Well, ask a friend or your child or your grandchild.
One of my, I'm teasing, one of my 4 grandchildren can probably help me do that. As soon as I find the card.
Exactly.
Washington, everybody took a picture of you. You know, I'm sure that somebody in the hospital has a picture of that card already.
Absolutely. And there are a number of online vaccine reminder platforms. So even if you don't have it on your phone, you can always log into a public computer at the library and access your protected information to find out when you do. And a follow-up to that question, is the vaccine dose free and the cost of getting the vaccine free, Dr. Hill?
We hear so many missed messages, and we just have to, and this group knows it, and those of you listening, you've heard something, please go out and tell someone. I look up at the screen and see some of you there attentively listening. Please tell someone. I had a patient on Thursday, and I asked her, what about, are you gonna get the vaccine? And she said, I heard it was $500 to get it. And nothing could be further from the truth. The vaccine is free. Now, as some have said, if you get it in your doctor's office, which is really not quite possible yet, there may be an administrative charge for a nurse giving you the injection. But the vaccine itself is free. And if you look far enough, you can get it for free.
Yes.
Shouldn't cost anything.
Great. So Dr. Godillo, can you get the vaccine if you had an allergic reaction or to foods or other medications?
Yes, the only one that is contraindicated if you had a reaction to the vaccine itself or one of the vaccine components, but the vaccine components are very minimal. You know, you only have mRNA. So basically, to be allergic to mRNA, you have to have the vaccine before. There's no one else in the world ever had mRNA before, or one of the fat bubble components where the mRNA is encased to deliver. And that's something called PEG, P-E-G. But you can ask a million people, nobody is going to say, yes, I'm allergic to PEG. Because it's a medication that's used in certain laxatives, you know, that is given for colon preps. So there's very few people that are going to tell you, yes, I'm allergic to colonoscopy preparations. So those would be the only ones that are contraindicated. Now, a lot of people will tell you I'm allergic to penicillin, I'm allergic to some food or perfumes. Are those contraindications to the vaccine? They are not. But well, just out of extreme caution, all the vaccination centers will observe you instead of 15 minutes, will give you a 30-minute observation. And the vast majority of the reactions to the vaccine, allergic reactions to the vaccine, occur very early after the vaccine is given, usually within 15 minutes, and almost 98% of them will occur within 30 minutes. So very few allergic reactions will be missed after those 30 minutes of observation.
Okay. We kind of touched on this, Dr. Merritt, but will the vaccine reduce the transmission of COVID-19 infections?
Well, around this a few different ways. If we can reduce the number of people that get infected, we reduce the number of infectious people. However, we don't know that someone may be asymptomatically infected. And there's that 5% variable that Dr. Hill also mentioned. The only way to really reduce the number of infections ultimately is for everyone to wear their masks simultaneously and not give the virus a place to land until we achieve enough people who aren't going to get infected and have active infections where they're going to have a higher viral load that they could spread to other people. That even if they had on a mask, it's like that's how we manage in the hospital. When I travel, I've taken care of all these patients. Thank God. I remained negative the entire time because of the discipline as training as physicians, because we already had to deal with AIDS, hepatitis, all these MRSA and everything else. If you follow proper procedures, you won't transmit and you won't get infected. That's our only hope. The vaccine will help you have a much smaller risk of getting infected and getting sick with COVID.
Can I make a comment
Yeah, go ahead.
before we finish up? And that is, someone asked about breastfeeding and whether or not if you're breastfeeding, can you receive the vaccination? And the answer is yes. Someone asked during pregnancy, can you receive it? The answer is yes. You probably should discuss it with your OBGYN doctor. And the other point, I would be remiss if I did not say this, and we've all said, wear a mask, wear a mask, wear a mask. Now, the important thing is to wear the mask properly, and my mask is across the room, but it needs to cover your nose. The mask, there's so many people, and I know those of us on this call have seen people wearing their masks and their nose is sticking out and you can see their nostrils. That is the incorrect way to wear the mask. It is very important to wear the mask over your nose and over your mouth. So do yourself and those you come in contact with a favor, and please wear the mask properly.
Great.
And I just want to echo that particular comment that Washington was bringing up, and Lisa too. Like I've been seeing patients with COVID every day. In fact, I was I diagnosed the first COVID patient in Florida back on February 28th. And from that day on, I've probably seen people with COVID every day, wearing a mask, wearing my PPE. I never acquired COVID. So I've been heavily exposed. So masks work, PPE works, hand hygiene works, okay? Now, having said that, I think that we need to acknowledge the inequities of the system. Luz was talking about how we live in multi-generational homes. People at higher socioeconomic strata don't have to deal with this. But for example, I have friends that I know in California that are suffering in Southern California. In the Latino communities, this is happening, where the great-grandparents all the way to the grandchildren live together in a one-bedroom apartment. So it's very difficult to prevent transmission during that particular setting. So this is when I'm telling in our country, we have a lot of challenges. If you go to other countries, for once, we have not accepted this culture that we need to social distance, wear the mask when we should. But on top of that, we have a lot of inequities that prevent us from doing that. If you go to other countries, China, a lot of the Southeast Asian countries, even countries that are much poorer than us have done a much better job because of cultural issues, because the government helped them, because when they get sick, you get paid sick leave, they give you a place to stay, they put you in a hotel, all these other things that we don't have here. So it becomes even more important, in my opinion, to get vaccinated because it's going to protect us, and I think hopefully with the new administration, we're going to get more vaccine because there is no question in my mind, there's a supply issue, but there's also a distribution issue. And then there's a last mile issue where we need to put it on people's arms. But also we have vaccine hesitancy and misinformation and disinformation. So the challenges ahead of us are huge. And we all need to work together on this, and I'm so glad that Randall and Winston put together this because this is the only way that we're going to move forward. You know, our communities are severely affected by this. We have huge challenges. We've talked about some of the things, but there's a lot of work to do.
Great. So Dr. Taylor, how does COVID-19 impact the brain?
So what we have found from studies, early studies here, and also from China and other places, is that COVID can worsen depression. Certainly neurologically, there have been an increase in headaches, stroke, complaints, sleep disturbances, which again can lead to depression and anxiety if not treated, and all this, also this notion of kind of a foggy brain or some memory issues, in addition to losing your sense of taste and smell, which also can lead to depression. So there certainly have been those kind of effects of COVID-19, which again speaks to getting the vaccination. It speaks to, you know, having a relationship with your healthcare provider. And as Lisa, you know, has continued to, Dr. Mayer has continued to say, you know, wearing a mask, washing your hands, and social distancing, because there definitely have been those effects neurologically and psychiatrically.
Great. And Ms. Cosera, I know you're trying to protect your community, and you know, there's been a lot of pushback from having shutdowns and close-ups and curfews. What happens if people in your community don't want to get vaccinated? Are things like restricting access to community-based activities something on your radar screen?
So we've been very fortunate to have so many partnerships with organizations in Sarasota, Manatee, and you know, Dr. Mary is really an amazing leader and an inspiration. She brought us together, and we've been going out, especially to those zones that were in red in terms of the increase of COVID-19. But also, there are so many vulnerable populations in the Latino community. We're talking about the farm workers, people who work in the healthcare, in the restaurant industry, in the senior homes. They are really at risk of getting COVID-19. And so having those conversations has been an ongoing issue since mid-March. And this is like a long ride that has not been ending. We continue to do the work, going out in the community. And thanks to the multicultural action teams, we've been able to train people who are parents or trusted members of the community, because they're going to listen to them more than they would probably listen to anybody else, you know. In the Latino community, and Dr. Gordillo knows this, you need the 3 Ps. So they listen to the doctor, to the pastor, and to the teacher, right? And sometimes people still have those reservations, those ideas. One of the things that I want to bring up that it's also in the chat room is the fact that some people think that because they got COVID-19, they have the antibodies, and then they are immune from getting it again. There is a question there about someone whose spouse had developed COVID-19 and had other medical complications. And she's asking about the treatment of plasma from other people that were infected and recovered. So I would like maybe Dr. Gordillo, Dr. Mary to address this, because it's an issue that I hear very much in the Latino community. Oh, you know, you got these, you have the antibodies, but they think the antibodies are forever, and which is not the case, right?
Yeah, actually, in the antibodies, we've done a lot of research on that. We participated in the largest clinical trial here for convalescent plasma here at Sarasota Memorial. We gave thousands of convalescent plasma. Unfortunately, it doesn't work unless you give it early in the disease. And when I'm talking about early, it has to be within the first probably 3 days of the onset of symptoms. After that, the amount of virus spontaneity, your immune system brings the virus down, and the disease is mostly an inflammatory disease. No virus, your immune system is overreft and causing damage in your organs that way. So it kind of becomes an autoimmune disease. So convalescent plasma has a role, but it's much more limited than what we thought at the very beginning. And the same thing goes for those monoclonal antibodies. I was the principal investigator of the Regeneron trial, the same one that President Trump got. Same thing. It only works when you give it early. So those things have a very limited role in the treatment of this virus.
Great. Well, we're going to finish the round robin. What we're going to do is try to answer as many, if not all, of the questions that came in through our chat box. I know Dr. Hill has pulled some of those out already. But one of the questions from the Latino community is if they had COVID vaccine, do they need to get vaccinated? I think we addressed that. But is the first dose and the second dose of the vaccine the same?
It is. Yes, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But the side effects may be a little stronger the second time because you're boosting.
Okay.
So it's important to anticipate that. That doesn't mean, oh, they gave you COVID. Okay, don't start saying that, people.
The side effects particularly may be more bothersome in the younger folks, under 65. It was,
Okay.
in fact, Manny had a beautiful slide. I need that slide that divided folks up into young and older, and the side effects were a little stronger in the younger folks. That's probably why some of our nurses, after the second dose, called in sick the next day or two.
And I did want to circle back to the. I'm sorry, finish.
Let me finish. There's a question in the chat, and it kind of says that we need to try to believe science. It says the virus rides on droplets, so you don't need a mask to filter the virus particle size. If you are properly distanced, then also need to reduce the load of exposure. Question's a little confusing to me, but the bottom line is all of these measures that we do, social distancing, keeping down the crowd, wearing the mask, reduces risk. So to say, well, I'll wear a mask, but I won't social distance, or I'll social distance, but when I go to Target, I won't wear a mask because I can always be 6 feet away from someone. All of those are not true, and that we need to wear a mask and social distance and wash our hands.
Right.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, that was actually, I was answering a question about what kind of mask, and I was pointing out, clinicians need to wear N95s. You're in the ICU, you're in close, there's a lot of viral load, there's a lot of aerosolized risk. But people in the street, you can wear your cloth mask, double layer, whatever, that's sufficient, particularly if you're also keeping the distance away. But you must wear the mask, that's a given. I also, earlier, there was a question Luz had brought up that we didn't really ever answer back. There was a question about a family with a cancer survivor and whether or not they should get the vaccination. And yes, certainly, if anyone has a complex, fragile medical condition, it should be in consultation with their treating clinician if they have that, please. If somebody is severely immune compromised and they may be in a state where they're not able to build an immune system or an immune response, that's a very unique circumstance. But in general, that's a high-risk population, and we want to vaccinate them and the people around them and caregivers for them to reduce chance of them bringing active infection to that person. And we certainly should try to maintain as much universal precautions. For example, we've had people that are immune compromised, and we have to do kind of reverse isolation. In other words, we protect them by making everybody wear masks and gloves and everything before going in the room, because we don't want to bring something to that person. Even a simple cold could get that person very, very sick. So I hope that further answers that question, because I don't think we really addressed that.
Right. But for those individuals that are on immune suppressants, what is the effectiveness of the vaccine in that population? Do we know?
It hasn't been studied directly, but I can tell you based on other vaccines, like influenza and many others, the vaccines are not as effective for all those populations. You probably are between 10 to 20% less effective as a general rule. So instead of getting a 95% effective, you may get an 80% effectiveness, but it hasn't been measured. But as a general rule for vaccines that can be given, and this is another question I get asked. If I don't get this Moderna, I can get any of the others that are coming down the pike. And the answer is, as a general rule, yes. There are only a few vaccines that cannot be given in immunocompromised folks or in pregnant women, which are the live vaccines.
Exactly.
Those we don't recommend, but in terms of research of what's being done for this coronavirus, for COVID, only the Chinese vaccines are live attenuated. So I guess you don't go to China to get vaccinated if you're pregnant or if you are immunocompromised.
Right. And this goes along with the same guidelines for individuals who have had a transplantation, who are on very high dose immune suppressants on a chronic basis. They're able to get the non-live vaccines without any complications. So this would fit within those same guidelines.
Yeah, I would like to put it, I have an 80-year-old aunt right now who was on immune suppression for rheumatoid arthritis, who unfortunately is in hospital fighting COVID on a ventilator, coming off slowly, but she got the monoclonal antibodies, which we believe helped, give her a boost she needed. And so that's a positive. If someone has had infection, remember, we were out yesterday at the Goodwill in Manatee doing a huge community event in partnership with the Blood Mobile, which we still need blood donations. They're down and because people are afraid. But if you've had COVID and you're positive and you have a good antibody response, we need that plasma to help other people. And I think there was another comment in Spanish of a woman giving testimony that it was helpful to her husband. So it's not that the vaccine is going to be detrimental. It may not be quite as effective, but I can assure you somebody who's immune compromised that gets COVID is going to have severe complications like my aunt is fighting through right now.
They're going to have severe complications. And even though the effectiveness of the vaccine is lower because they're taking immunocompromised drugs, it's better for them to get the vaccine than not.
They'll have some response. Their body can amp up when it needs to. All you need is a few circulating memory cells.
Yeah, if you have one of those diseases that your immune system is so weak, if you get COVID, you're going to be in trouble.
You're going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah.
So one of the questions related to vaccine scams, and certainly with the availability in certain communities, people might be likely to go out when they hear, some clinic somewhere, fly-by-night clinic, has some vaccine that were left over and just rush down today and get it. We don't advise that at all. You can go to your health center, and there's certainly a list locally through many of the individuals on this call to verify that you're getting the vaccine from a health center or a clinic. And most health departments, I know we're doing that in Georgia, and I would assume Florida has the same. The health department lists all of the approved vaccine administration sites, so you can always check through that resource. And then hopefully all of the pharmacies who give all the other vaccines will get approved in time, so that would be an excellent place to get a trusted source of vaccine that has been stored appropriately. And let me just back up to masks, because we did talk a lot about it, and probably the most fashionable things that people are using are the gaithers, and that's the least likely way to protect yourself. While they are fashionable and seem to cover all the parts that you want, they do not protect you against COVID-19. And in fact, some of the studies I believe were done up in New England showed that it causes the particles to become smaller when the person breathes through the gaithers because of the material. So just wanted to throw that in. Let's see if there are other questions, and then I'm going to turn it back over to our executive CEO, Dr. Morgan, to close us out. We're also going to put in the link for two resources in the chat box. One is the registration document that you can fill out to sign up to get the vaccine. Also, the COBB Institute will be reaching out through your community and other parts of the US to get people involved in clinical trials, both for COVID-19, but in general. We did a good job with the COVID-19 in the early trials, but this has to be sustaining for a whole host of health issues that all of these experts have been addressing for many years. And then we have another meeting that's coming up on the 27th to talk about climate change. And who knows, we don't know whether COVID arose because of some of the changes to the climate and environmental impact, and certainly we'll have to address those as well, but you'll see the invite there. I want to, at this point, just thank all of my presenters, Dr. Gordillo, Dr. Taylor, Dr. Hill, Ms. Conchita, Dr. Merritt. You've done a phenomenal job. This has been an excellent wealth of information that is invaluable to the communities that are on this call, but certainly we'll want to try to replicate this through our executive director. And with that, I will turn it back over to our esteemed leader, Dr. Randall Morgan.
Thank you, Dr. Price. Thank you very much for leading such a wonderful panel discussion today. We appreciate the stellar performance of our moderator, Dr. Price, and all of our speakers today, particularly because this idea came about probably 10 days ago in an open discussion that we had with colleagues from Gamma Xi Boulé in Sarasota. And we were able to bring all of the different organizations together. We had over 100 people on this call for the entire time of the webinar. And it will excite us and stimulate us to do other programs in the future, particularly with the talent that we have in our community as well as nationally, to be able to present this information for you in real time. I think the most important thing to remember is that everything is changing. Every week there is a change in terms of COVID-19, in terms of our community response, in terms of the priorities in the communities. And so please stay tuned. The COBB Institute will keep you up to date, along with Gulfcoast Medical Society and the Multicultural Health Institute, the National Medical Association, and Unidos Now. We appreciate the stellar performance again of our moderator and speakers. Please remember to complete the post-webinar survey and to review the supporting information about vaccines provided in the chat, including a list of common questions and answers about vaccines provided by Dr. Reggie Woods, a retired ObGyn physician and a member of the Gulfcoast Medical Society and the president of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity of Minnesota. These are the type of contributions that we get all the time in our community. And so no one in our community should go not understanding all of the basic information about vaccines and COVID-19. A special acknowledgement to our technical supporter, Lily Piper of AMC Source. The next webinar and program sponsored by the COBB Institute will be, as Dr. Price mentioned, a webinar which will actually be a 4 or 5 hour webinar, but there will be pointed areas open to the public, certainly about climate, and we will discuss a lot of the new initiatives of Biden administration with regard to climate and health, and also the focus will be on heat with regard to the adverse effects of climate. Please visit our website, www.thecobbinstitute.org, for other information related to COVID-19 and about upcoming programs. Have a good day and continue to be safe.